From pandering studio heads to gaming development and consultation, to making up a ludicrous 80% of modern fiction writers, liberal white women are making modern entertainment a drag. The most terrible personification of this X-chromosome Caucasian combo is of course Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy, who would be the consequence if the figurative Debbie Downer took literal human form, and the very sight of whom can cause even the most stout, twitching, and medically enhanced stiffy to subside, the penile tissue to wilt and shrivel, the glands to fade from purple to a stricken white, and the testicles to alarmedly quiver like ping-pong balls dropped and rapidly vibrating into stillness, before withering so far into retraction that they invert like an abrupt and unnatural reversal into prepubescence. Given the reins of Lucasfilm and charged with bringing new beloved Star Wars films to the screen, Kennedy oversaw the most guaranteed home run since Babe Ruth faced off against a Little League pitcher with polio and visual asymmetry, with The Force Awakens reuniting Han Solo, Princess Leia, and including 10 seconds of Luke Skywalker. And then, after satisfying consumers with a perfectly serviceable first entry, Kennedy began to systematically eviscerate the franchise, stalk a whole generation's dreams and fantasies like a nostalgia equivalent of Freddy Krueger.
Ray Skywalker.
Kennedy has repeatedly lamented that the generally male Star Wars fanbase is often wary and unreceptive to change, which might have some validity as an argument if she had at least offered a sop to that audience by including just one cool new dude with a lightsaber in any of the 12 films and shows that have come and gone or are slated to be produced, and who saw the sequel trilogy helmed by a strong female character, supported by two overwrought, high-strung, and often emotionally incontinent guys, one of whom was protractedly put in his place, dressed down and had his testicles tucked into the deeper recesses of the handbag of a strong female character, icon Luke Skywalker reduced to a morose, ineffectual old hermit, Rogue One featuring a strong and stoic female protagonist, streaming show Ahsoka featuring a strong and stoic female protagonist, aided by a strong general female character, and following the rise to an apotheosis with the Force of a plucky young female character, and then The Acolyte, helmed by Hollywood's heedlessly heretical, hypochondriac, hysterically harebrained harridan hawking horrifically hackneyed hammy-hooey, Leslie Headland, whose ratio of ocular outrages, slanders against sensibility, and abhorrences of aesthetics are matched only by her ratio of glasses lenses to overall face, with a cast including a non-binary diverse actress, a homosexual actor playing a mimsy Jedi, a homosexual actor playing another even mimsier Jedi, a morbidly obese guy playing a Jedi, Headland's wife being lesbian playing a strident Jedi, another curly-haired guy playing a mimsy, emotionally immature Jedi, and a show featuring a coven of lesbian space witches, crashing and burning in the ratings despite upwards of $250 million being expended on what was ultimately a fanfic-level identitarian vanity project that floated no one's boat, was no one's cup of tea, and got cancelled after one season.
Cringe.
Amazon's prestige billion-dollar show The Rings of Power is overseen by Jennifer Solke, the appearance on screen of whom has been known through some ghastly psychic projection to simultaneously cause outdoor barbecues to flame out and hot plates to turn cold, NASCAR vehicles to grind to a halt and pile up, hunting rifles to jam, quarterbacks to fumble footballs, and bear to turn flat. Not only has she indulged every identity politics excess, leading to the fanbase listlessly checking out because the pandering, modern audience soliciting, and flaky modern sensibilities around male characterization has been disproportionate, and none of the glaring issues with quality have been addressed, she also saw to it that every episode of the second season be directed by a woman. Finding robust, compelling, and relatably masculine male characters and male interpersonal relationships in The Rings of Power is as rare as detecting a flicker of simple human warmth in Velma. It would be bad enough if only iconic brands of film and streaming were doused and left sopping with white liberal estrogen, but sadly, such soggy saturations have seeped into and slathered the realm of gaming as well. Sweet Baby Inc. was founded in Canada as a gaming diversity consultancy. As the world now knows, Sweet Baby Inc. was a supernaturally summoned corporate succubus that existed primarily to advise gaming companies to include greater representation in games, demonstrable emotional range from male characters, and due to simple fun in gaming, what the nothing in the never-ending story did to the land of Fantasia, tearing away spirit, fun, good vibes, and killing buzzes by adding and altering content that no one appreciated or especially asked for in service of attracting a wider audience that quite possibly doesn't exist. Alysa McAn, who is in every way the visual personification of absolute malignancy, has repeatedly raised her orange sunglasses-clad cranium into the discourse with all the abrupt pertness of a gopher scanning the horizon, and chastised us all for our unwillingness to see reason, our intractable, reactionary, misogynistic attitudes, with the charm, epigrammatic wit, rhetorical flair, and sophistication of a stroppy girl in a high school cafeteria. The gaming world, she lamented, is so incorrigibly stuck in the mud, not supporting Dustborn, where the power of language can be used to effectively cancel opponents in gameplay, a game that crashed and burned, or Concord, where the characters range from steampunk Angela Bassett to an obese lesbian in puce lipstick, which cost upward of $400 million, and perhaps the greatest folly of the modern age, being withdrawn after 8 days, and refunds given to the smattering of players who gave it a go. Liberal white women have been hypocritical over age in relationships too. For decades, Hollywood was chided for aging male characters having girlfriends and wives that were considerably younger, and this stereotypical fantasy being dated and even creepy. Just earlier this year, Laura Dern asserted that her character's relationship with Sam Neill's character in Jurassic Park was troubling because of their age difference. Yet, here is 57-year-old Laura Dern in a romance movie with 34-year-old Liam Hemsworth. And The Idea of You, where Selene, a 40-year-old single mom, begins an unexpected romance with 24-year-old Hayes Campbell, the lead singer of August Moon, the hottest boy band on the planet.
I've been internalizing a really complicated situation in my head.
The assertion will be, of course, that in contrast to the older guy hookups of yesteryear, these are emotionally nourishing relationships. No, it's still older chicks smashing young dudes, and no one would call MILF Manor especially emotionally nourishing. But that is watched over a glass of wine for its cheeky audacity and frothy, horny silliness. Perhaps the most egregious overcompensation and cultural overdose of liberal white women in entertainment is in the world of publishing. It's gotten ridiculous now. 83% of marketing, 92% of publicity, and 78% of editorial staff in Britain's publishing industry are female. In 2021, 75% of new titles in the general and literary fiction category were by female authors. Over the past 5 years, The Observer's annual debut novelist feature has showcased 44 writers, 33 of whom were female. The Guardian's 10 Best Debut Novelists of 2022 featured 2 men and 8 women. The Rathbones Prize, shortlisted for 2023, featured no men. One of 3 things has to be true. Either male authors have gotten worse, or white female authors have gotten better, or were always better all along, or liberal white women have become disproportionately represented in publishing and promote liberal white women, writing stories featuring liberal white women to be read by liberal white women. You would have to be deeply emotionally immature or harboring some kind of morbidities and bitterness if you for a second took the attitude that this ludicrous gender imbalance was somehow deserved after such an age of the imbalance going the other way, that it was a kind of fitting restitution, and that this would be good for literature and for culture. You'd also have to be emotionally immature to have such a blind spot to think that male writers have traditionally had proclivities, tics, limitations, omissions in their writing, and yet women rising into prominence wouldn't have opposite but equivalent omissions, tics, and proclivities that might not be all that agreeable or relatable to vast swaths of men. Well, it's time for a bit of overdue honesty, which is to say, quite often, reading a disproportionate amount of fiction written by women, you'll have, from a guy's perspective, a disproportionate amount of sensuality, a disproportionate amount of sentimentality, a disproportionate amount of bright, convivial humor that doesn't quite translate and isn't quite universal. If you admit or allow for the idea that there are traits in men's fiction that you've always found a little off, a little cursory, lacking in abstraction or even lived experience, then it's not asking too much to acknowledge that the opposite can also be true. And if the current market of fiction is disproportionately awash at a 4-to-1 ratio, it can also have a cause and effect of dissuading men and boys from thinking that the publishing industry and literature is for them, creating a negative cycle, an emerging echo chamber of cosmopolitan liberal-leaning women and a social milieu of cosmopolitan liberal-leaning women interested in themes and content and signable new authors who are cosmopolitan liberal-leaning women for a literary marketplace of cosmopolitan liberal-leaning women. And if you think I'm being a little histrionic, think of it in the wider terms of cultural footprint. How many contemporary authors can you think of that are household names? How many contemporary authors are in the cultural zeitgeist, discussed socially? How many contemporary authors can you think of that hip undergraduates have as paperbacks in their backpacks on college campuses? How many contemporary authors can you remember having enough of a public profile and being compelling enough to be on late-night talk shows? Ask not if contemporary authors are thriving commercially, but whether they're thriving outside the world of literary festivals and online literary magazines, in the zeitgeist, in the collective imagination. Substance and quality of writing trumps theme, of course, but at school level, boys aren't shying away from competitions entirely because they're intimidated by the standards, or because their brains have been rewired for the shorter and sharper dopamine hits of playing video games. They're eschewing these competitions because they're lame, they're a prissy downer, unreceptive to their preoccupations and more visceral interests. These competitions need less liberal-leaning white women and more relatable male judges who can address the tonal imbalances and create a permission structure for boys to feel that it is worth their while to submit pieces that are suffused with things that actually interest them. Rugged individualism, the mordantly sarcastic, the visceral, the sexually and socially competitive, the lurid, the dissident. This may go some way to promoting a wider array of young voices. Women in the publishing industry need to allow for the idea, as intensely counterintuitive as it is, that they may be, to some extent, part of the problem. Instead of posing handkerchief-wringing questions like, why is there such a crisis of boys not reading? Or why are boys so lost and lacking in confidence when it comes to fiction and literature? Here's the thing you might not be comprehending. They're not envisaging themselves in a crisis, nor lost, nor lacking in confidence. They are bored. They find you boring. They find the literary competitions available to them unappealing and boring. Unless you're a tediously strict social constructivist, you would largely agree that no man could realistically have written A Room of One's Own or The Handmaid's Tale. And by contrast, there are certain proclivities and preoccupations and attitudes that men can bring to literature. There has always been, up until recently, a certain breed of male writers able to capture the zeitgeist in a way that bursts out of the publishing world, whose works become cultural touchstones. Those authors are cool, or were cool, in the way that indie musical acts are cool, and they're largely gone now. The best male authors have an aptitude for exploring the territory of dystopian fiction, full of portents about technology, science and medicine and societal breakdown, and the threats of autocracy and failed ethics. Another mode of writing that is sorely lacking in contemporary literary culture, the male ability to combine depravity with the high literary, a proclivity spanning Nabokov's Lolita to Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Now, when you get down to it, there is of course a great deal of exemplary recent shows, films and novels from the liberal white woman demographic in my sights, and I'm sort of just messing around with flagrant analogies and an ironical exasperation. But the fundamentals, the contours of what I raised are absolutely relevant, and the statistics glaring and undeniable. And I didn't even get started on Taylor Swift. My God.